Coming up on this week's episode of Needed Conversations.
When we allow all of these opinions to shape our view of what success actually is, then we find ourselves exhausted, depleted, overworked, undervalued. We find ourselves in the wrong place at the wrong time.
A lot of times we don't know how much time we have because we spend it on things that are really futile.
Let go of hustle culture that tells us that our worth is based on our performance. And we embrace kingdom culture that says our worth is rooted in our identity and intimacy with Christ.
We're trained even from the early age, like going to school, to perform on our tests and to hit a specific mark. But I feel like that teaches us to constantly be striving to hit a marker that constantly moves farther and farther away from us.
If you don't first understand your purpose, you're never going to access your true power. It's always going to be this counterfeit. It's your ego that is striving for man's affirmation or approval. Before you understand purpose, you got to understand presence. That if your life is not centered on something bigger than yourself, the Most High, His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. One of the biblical principles that I want to lay out to you guys is the idea of rest before responsibility. Adam's first full day on earth was Sabbath.
When you say rest, most people will say, well, what does that mean to rest? To some, they will either translate, well, that means I can just trust fully God and not do anything. Well, it says faith without works is dead.
Right.
So you have to still put motion behind it, but it means that you don't have to strive. And to me, rest means trust. I trust in God's timing. I trust in God's process. I trust that He has a purpose and a plan for me.
The Sabbath is, I'm going to rest first and then do my work from the place of rest. This mindset establishes a kingdom rhythm where we don't work for rest, we work from rest. You can glean more in an hour in the presence of God by listening to His voice that could help you leap over weeks, if not months or years of striving and work in trial and error. Welcome back. We are in the middle of our series, The Presence Pledge, and we're continuing our conversation today. We're talking about how to set margins and boundaries for your marriage when it comes to work and helping you to reframe what success really looks like. So you're going to want to stay tuned. We're excited because this Presence Pledge for us has been really good. It's been challenging, but we've seen some growth out of it. What would you say?
Yeah, I think it helps us to have an opportunity to be able to read and maybe ask some questions and have some good conversations. A lot of couples complain about how they don't have a lot of time. And this is why we did this challenge, is just to show you that a lot of times we don't know how much time we have because we spend it on things that are really futile. They don't serve any kind of purpose. And even in regards to working, we want to help you guys to create a boundary because all of us, I think right now in this day and age, work on our computers or on our phones. And so it makes it a lot harder for us to disconnect because by the time you finish your work, now you want to decompress. And most of us decompress in which way? We scroll.
So for those who are just jumping into this Presence Pledge, you're like, what is the Presence Pledge? Do you want to tell them a little bit about what it is?
You go ahead.
Well, it is a digital detox and a rhythm reset for your marriage. And essentially it is an 8-week challenge, but it can go longer than that. And you can start it at any time where you and your spouse decide to make the 2 hours before and after bed holy hours, where you center your life back around the presence of God and the presence of your spouse. And a part of that is just a list of things that you sign up to commit to with your spouse. We created a landing page for it. You can go to moremostforever.com, read through the Presence Pledge and what you guys are signing and committing to together. It's very simple. It's not like a complete detox or separation from digital devices altogether, but it is in particular helping you to reframe the most important hours, which we believe are the 2 hours when you wake up and the 2 hours right before you go to bed. And also just getting your phone at least 5 feet away from your bed at all times That's going to help reinvigorate intimacy in your marriage. So go and sign up and let us know that you've joined the rest of us on this presence pledge by going to moremostforever.com. And go back and listen to the last couple of episodes in this particular series, because it's going to really help you understand the context of why it's important to center your marriage around presence. But also it feeds into what we're talking about today, which is kind of redefining what success looks like and making sure that you are operating from a place of presence and not from a place of striving and from your own pride and ego and even your own gifts that God gave you. But your gift, if not breathed upon by the Holy Spirit, becomes this vacant, empty vessel for the enemy to just almost sabotage your life. Sometimes your gift could be your greatest curse when it's put into the wrong hands. And so today we're talking about work boundaries, how to add margin to your life, the importance of a Sabbath lifestyle, not just saying, okay, once a week we're going to have a Sabbath like they did in the Old Testament, but to really make that a mindset that everything that you do, you're doing it from a place of rest instead of performance and pressure.
And you have to always reel yourself in, because it's so easy for us to get onto this performance wheel, because we're trained even from the early age, like going to school, to perform on our tests and to hit a specific mark. But I feel like that teaches us to constantly be striving to hit a marker that constantly moves farther and farther away from us. And I think that causes us to set aside all rest of the things just so that we can focus on what the world says is success. You know what I'm saying?
And that doesn't mean you take a lackadaisical approach to life either.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you allow the milestones and the metrics that you live your life by to be set by the Holy Spirit, by God, and dictated by ultimately your purpose. So you have to ask yourself, what is your purpose? What has God called you to do? One of the courses that I have online is presence, purpose, and power. Right. And I put it in that order because most people, they want to access their power, right, that leads to influence and wealth, or money rather. But if you don't first understand your purpose, you're never going to access your true power. It's always going to be this counterfeit. Right. It's your ego that is striving for man's affirmation or approval or the things you didn't get as a child that you really needed. And then you scale it back one layer. Before you understand purpose, you got to understand presence. That if your life is not centered on something bigger than yourself, the Most High, His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And if you don't center your life around the presence of God and intimate connection with your spouse, who is your purpose partner, then you're never going to be able to access that power that you long to see in your life released. Yeah. So how do you reclaim your energy? Well, the Presence Pledge is a part of that. So setting aside those 2 hours before and after bed, for me, has been a struggle. And I'll tell you why. Because my mind is always spinning, and I have so grown accustomed to keeping my phone by my bed. And even if I'm not scrolling social media, I'm allowing myself to scroll news articles, or even if I'm reading the Bible, my mind is still churning and turning. And so in particular, there have been, I would say over the last week, 2 or 3 nights where it felt like I was just going to go crazy, because I'm almost like insomnia a little bit, having to kind of go through the journal of my mind and all of the daily entries that I've put in and say, I can just push that aside. I can just push that aside. I can just push that aside. And really praying into my sleep, because I don't know, it feels a little tormenting, but I know I'm detoxing this bad rhythm in my life. And I have found that when I get to sleep, I'm sleeping deeper. It feels less interrupted.
Yeah, for me, I think I would say mornings are probably the most challenging, because I like to get up and get on with my day. Like, I want to just go ahead and start my list. I want to move on past it. So one of the things that has been really helpful is doing my walks in the morning. Yes, it's part of my exercise, but it's also, again, like I've said before, I don't take my phone with me. I don't listen to podcasts. It's my time to reflect. And it's been really challenging for me to focus and not have a to-do list in my brain, but really train my mind to pray, because it's very easy for me to start like praying and then I derail. And think about some person that I'm praying, and then all the situations that are arising. And it's like, I find myself no longer praying, but pondering on this specific scenario and how can I offer wisdom or help. And I'm like, now I've taken that burden, instead of giving it to God, I've taken it up on myself. And again, once you start some kind of a habit, we're not saying it's going to be easy, for sure. Right. One of the things that I personally started doing myself is I need to get back to fasting. I mean, fasting for health reasons, but also I think to get your flesh in check. And something that I started doing was fasting from 2:30 in the afternoon to 2:30 the next day. So instead of doing like most people do a full day fast, I think that's kind of challenging.
It's still 24 hours.
It is still 24 hours, but I find it a little bit easier to ease myself back into the habit of I need to start fasting.
And you're doing that like once a week.
And I try to do that once a week. Yeah. And that has been helpful to refocus, and because you can get caught up in a specific routine and you become lazy in making the right decisions for either your health or even your mental state or your spiritual health. And it's very easy to take on burdens that you're not meant to carry, and then it reflects in your health, it reflects in your behavior, it reflects in the level of your anxiety, like you were saying. When you don't go through this information or the same routine that you've gone through, now I almost have to retrain my brain. This is not what we do every day. Now I have to read a book and digest that information through this way instead of looking at the screen.
Yeah, and one of the things we did over these last couple of weeks is this past Friday we hosted a Passover dinner at our house, and we had 30-ish adults and about eight or 10 kids, and it was truly refreshing. We wanted to do something different than just host another service. We're going to host services with the church community that we're building around us, and all of that is good, but I think that the core part of discipleship is the table, and even the act of resting at a table and being face to face, the way that we purposefully set up the room. We didn't come into the night asking anybody like, hey, keep your phones away or anything like that. But what I did notice just looking around the room is that people weren't on their phones.
Yeah, that was very surprising. Yeah. I guess now that I'm looking back at it, I did not see people on their phone.
But we did kind of move them through these kind of activities to help them engage with one another. But it was so refreshing that even me, I wanted to be like, I need to document this moment. And you took a few little clips, but my first instinct was, I need to put this on social media, or I need to set up a camera over there and do this and that. And there's times for that, I think, but for what we were doing in that moment, it was really about focusing in on those relationships. Right. And it was an incredible night of breakthrough and healing, and there were special moments. There was revelation, and we all shared, and there was a lot of people who were strangers to one another, but really quickly there was this familial, communal environment that was created. And I think that if we could take that same idea and carry that through the rest of our life and our relationships, then we would be a lot better for it. To keep our heads up, looking at people in the eyes, going into the grocery store and not be so consumed. We fill every little bit of time waiting with our phones instead of looking up and looking around to say, is there an opportunity for me to even offer a smile? For me to offer, how are you doing? What's going on with your day? I mean, the kids can tell you, and probably Viktoriya too. Every time I go to the grocery store, I'm like, oh, what's your name? Or I read their name and I comment on their name, and I make conversation. There was a lady in the grocery store. I remembered last time I talked with her. Oh, you've got kids. How are your kids doing? Yeah. And creating those kind of connections instead of saying, while I'm waiting in this line, let me just go ahead and scroll on my phone, and so nobody talks to me and I can get in and get out. That's not human connection.
And in the same way, I think we've talked about this too before, about being at the table when we have dinner, is to remove those devices and intentionally asking questions with your children, like, how was your day? And we've had such a good time because we would ask questions, and their stories would be like so funny and hysterical, and just like to hear their viewpoint from their day and some of the highs and some of the lows. That's one of the questions that we ask. Or what was the high and what was the low? And being attentive to your children, they are going to notice that you were present and you actually cared. Not like beating yourself down to say, I have worked so hard and I have worked so much. Now I have to overcompensate and let me do this to-do list. And most of the time people end up doing things that they don't even need to do. Start giving gifts to their spouse.
Or their kids.
Sorry flowers. Or kids because they feel bad that they didn't spend enough time. But it's a simple change. Again, like we're doing this presence pledge. It's 2 hours before bed, 2 hours at night. It's not as drastic as a full, complete thing because we understand that people do work and they work on their computer. Maybe they're content creators or whatever they are doing. But it makes it a lot easier to say, if I can learn how to create these proper boundaries, then I'm going to be more present with my children, and me and my children, me and my spouse are going to have this nice, intimate relationships, and I'm going to get to know them more and understand how I can support them and ease that burden off of their shoulders. And in return, you feel more fulfilled and more equipped to be able to step into the next day or next week and be able to conquer your work that you are doing as well.
That's right. And bringing this into the core of the conversation about building margins for your work, one of the biblical principles that I want to lay out to you guys is the idea of rest before responsibility. This takes us all the way back to the book of Genesis. When I tell you Genesis 1, 2, and 3, there is so many layers of revelation. Every time I read it, it's astounding. But I want to read this. It says, and on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. It's so incredible to think about God resting, because we know that he's omnipotent, meaning he's all powerful. He doesn't have to sleep in the way that we do physically. Right. When he was incarnate in Jesus Christ. Yes, Jesus Christ has a physical body and had fatigue and needed to sleep or rest or whatever. But God the Father, especially at the beginning of creation, he has no need to rest because of fatigue. He rests as a sign. It was an illustrated sermon for Adam to say, I could have created you on day 2 or day 3 or day 4, but every aspect of creation was created in such an order and a sequence that by the time that particular aspect of creation got there, everything that it needed to live and thrive was already in place. So, of course, he's going to create light first before he creates seed-bearing plants, before he creates animals who are going to have to eat those plants in, and before finally on day 6, he creates man, saying, I'm planting you in a garden where everything you need to thrive and fulfill the purpose that I'm giving you is here. And before I command you to do anything, be fruitful, multiply, subdue, have dominion, the whole mandate, before I do any of that, I want to show you what it means to rest. Even though I don't need to rest, this is a statement that my work is complete and full, lacking nothing. Meaning that when I give you instruction, you don't have to conjure up things to make it happen. You trust me and you heed to my voice and not the voice of the enemy and not the voice of the world, to know that I'm withholding nothing from you that you need to fulfill your purpose. If you heed to that voice, you are going to thrive and do so from a place of rest and completion. Adam's first full day on earth was Sabbath. He was created on day 6. Most people think the Sabbath is the end of your week to finish from your days of working. But really, the Sabbath is the first day. The Sabbath is, I'm going to rest first and then do my work from the place of rest. This mindset establishes a kingdom rhythm where we don't work for rest, we work from rest. Where rest is not earned, it's inherited. And we rest in God's finished work and then co-labor with him from a posture of grace.
To me, when you say rest, like most people will say, well, what does that mean to rest? Mm-hmm. To some, they will either translate, well, that means I can just trust fully God and not do anything. Well, it says faith without works is dead.
Right.
So you have to still you have to have motion behind it, but it means that you don't have to strive. And to me, rest means trust. I trust in God's timing. I trust in God's process. I trust that he has a purpose and a plan for me, just like Jeremiah said, that for I know the plans that I have for you. It's to prosper. What is that?
To prosper you,
and
to give you an expected end.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so it's knowing the scriptures and to place your hope and trust in not your own abilities, but in God. And then in turn, you're going to view yourself from the appropriate lens of, I was created in God's image and likeness. I am walking in confidence in what God has given me. I'm walking from a place of, he gives me everything I need to fulfill my purpose and my assignment. That means I'm not striving to try to make ends meet or money. Sure, there are times when all of us as human beings are like concerned about how we're going to do this or how we're going to do that. And it just feels like we're on this hamster wheel of trying to attain something or reach something or even make ends meet. But throughout this process, if you trust in him, he's going to continue to elevate the way you think. And he's going to increase your capacity for more, which means that every step of the way, you may not know a full staircase, but you're going to know the steps that you should take. And you'll look back and you'll say, wow, if it wasn't for the Lord, I wouldn't have been able to do it. It's not in my own abilities that I was able to accomplish all of these tasks, but it's God opening these specific doors and God giving me the ability, the health, and also the resources that I need to fulfill my purpose and my assignment.
Yeah. That was the core of the deception. When the snake came to Eve, it was like, God's withholding something from you. If you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he knows your eyes will be opened and you'll know all things and you'll be like God. She was already made in the image and likeness of God. She had everything that she needed to fulfill that assignment that he gave her. And so when she gave ear to these other voices, which we all do every single day, whether it's like comparison on social media, we're looking at our neighbor down the street. We're allowing these projections that come through the educational system, through media and podcasts. When we allow all of these opinions to shape our view of what success actually is, then we find ourselves exhausted, depleted, overworked, undervalued. We find ourselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. The first time the word success is mentioned in the Bible is in the book of Joshua, when there's a changing of guards between the leadership of Moses into the next generation, Joshua. And God says, meditate on my word day and night, that it does not depart from you, and I will give you good success. That word success doesn't mean our modern view of success. It means significance. He's saying, if you meditate, put my word inside of you, I am going to make your life significant. That means success in the kingdom looks a lot grander and fuller than just the accumulation of things. It means that you have satisfaction about what you're doing. You feel a sense of fulfillment and you are experiencing the love and the joy of your family, and your career is not just something like a means to an end to get you what you want, but your career becomes intermeshed with your calling.
Yeah.
John 19:30, we know the famous words of Jesus. Right before he gave up his spirit, he said the famous words, it is finished. Yeah. Jesus declared his work complete. We know that it was from the curse that we entered into this works mentality, with part of the curse being Adam. Now you're going to work from the sweat of your brow, versus in the garden, you didn't have to work from the sweat of your brow. I laugh and tell people this. I don't think Adam and Eve had eyebrows in the garden because they didn't have to sweat. Maybe. Because your eyebrows are inherently made to keep the water from flooding your eyesight. So, it's to cause it to stream to the left and the right. So just imagine Adam and Eve with no eyebrows.
They were walking in the cool of the day, so they must have been cool at all times.
Maybe that'll help you remember kind of this teaching that we're talking about today. But when Jesus came, he reset things for us, and he declared it is finished in the same way that God did when he rested on the Sabbath, as a statement of saying, it's complete, it's done. There's nothing else that you can do that will add to this finished work. Now you just have to move and live from that place of finished work. So that means we're not striving to earn value or success in the kingdom. We're simply stewarding what has already been redeemed. We let go of hustle culture that tells us that our worth is based on our performance. And we embrace kingdom culture that says our worth is rooted in our identity and intimacy with Christ alone. So that means even as Jesus was arguing with the Pharisees about healing on the Sabbath and how they kept that day, and they were very religious and methodical about that particular day, he's like, I am the Sabbath. Enter into this rest. We see in Hebrews as well, behold, you will enter into this rest. Jesus was saying, it's great if you keep a Sabbath, but I want Sabbath to be a daily experience, a lifestyle that everything you do comes from a place of rest.
There is such a thing that when you hustle so much so that, again, you rely on your strength and what your abilities are, then you become so religious about it too, that it's like now everything becomes like a to-do list.
Yeah. Even your Sabbath becomes a to-do list.
Yeah.
And you almost...
So you don't even work, you don't even rest during that time because you already contemplate, what is my next step? What am I doing tomorrow?
All right. If you're watching on video right now, you would have noticed that we changed the scenery a little bit in the visual. So basically what happened was the audio cut off at the end and we didn't know it. So the last 7 minutes we want to re-record. So here we go.
Yeah.
What were we talking about, Viktoriya, before it stopped?
I think we were talking about the Sabbath day and how Jesus was talking about performing a miracle, and those religious people were so adamant about them sticking to the rules and regulations. And what I was going to say is that sometimes we get into this mode of it has to be a to-do list, and then we can't even enjoy the moment because we're too busy thinking about what we're doing next. So as we're talking about resting or working,
and you're the queen of the
rest,
to-do list, right?
I am the queen, so I'm probably the one to.
So even your Sabbath can be like
preoccupied.
That's right.
And busy. I have been trying to learn to settle into my roles and also appreciate the moments and taking the time to be with my kids and be present. And if they are talking to me, that I listen to them, that I'm not just like, oh yeah, I'm present. Like, what do you want to say? And then just, oh, whatever. But just like really relish in what the kids are saying or what your spouse is saying. This is how you build intimacy and how you're able to kind of work from a good place where you're not going to be striving so much so that you cause anxiety and panic attack and all that upon yourself because you're doing so much at one point. And that's not to say that some of the seasons are not busy. Some of the seasons are intense. And I think we try to communicate that to each other and say, hey, this is a very work intensive week. I just want to let you know I have this, this, and this, and this. Like yesterday, we communicated that. I said, hey, what do you have on your calendar? And I reminded him some of the things that we have as a family. And this is how you do it. I mean, but at the end of the day, you want to keep yourself accountable.
It's not legalistic.
Yeah.
Because Mark 2:27, Jesus said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And again, it's just reverse engineering the way that you think about success, in that the Sabbath isn't your reward for doing a good job at your work. It's that the Sabbath comes first, and that the work is born of this mentality of rest and finished work. And so the Sabbath isn't a legalistic rule. What we're trying to get you to understand is that it's a rhythm. It's a way of life. Jesus was the Sabbath. And so you shouldn't ignore the routine of making sure you consciously stop and rest. We want you to do that. But I think even in your work, I think it's counterintuitive to say, and I'm really bad at this because I'm an extremist in a lot of ways. So I'll almost work to the bone, almost punishing myself. And then I'll equally, on the opposite end of things, just rest, so to speak. And I'll distract myself. I have a hard crash and say, well, okay, well, this is just me recovering from how much I worked for God over here on this other side. And really this mentality of a Sabbath lifestyle is that you don't have a crash and burn at the end of the work. It's that you are continually operating in a place where even the work becomes effortless, so to speak. And that sounds to some of you so impossible, but it is possible whenever you're submitting your life to the leadership of the Holy Spirit and you stop striving and you stop pursuing the success goals that the world sets in front of you, and you start embracing a life of significance.
And I do have to say, too, one of the things that we have caught, I think, each other on is sometimes we have noticed one of us would go hard at specific thing, and then we would neglect a specific area, and we would see the consequences of that neglect. And we would say, hey, I don't think we're spending enough time together.
Yeah.
Or I'm seeing this child act out. I don't think we have been as intentional. Or even your silent children that don't say anything. So this is a good time for you guys to work collaboratively, and maybe one of you is more of a working mindset because you are bringing the income, and maybe you're a stay at home. So how do you find that balance for majority of the people to be able to connect and have an understanding? Hey, my spouse does have to work, but I think it's just having that open communication and also reeling each other in and helping to keep each other accountable and saying, hey, I think you are allowing some of your work, especially in the evenings, to seep in. You're taking these phone calls and it's taking like hour, 2 hours. And then it seems to me like you're spent. And I feel like that now you don't have the time to have conversation with me. I've just noticed you're short with me. So this is marriage. I mean, this is us having to work through these kinks, and it's not like you're going to figure this out and it's going to be done with. This is a constant thing that you have to keep yourself in check and say, am I doing the best I can? But not from a place of striving, but from a place of, am I trusting God in this process? And am I present? Am I being present with my family, with what the things that are important? And most importantly, am I dedicating my services unto the Lord, which means that I start, that I start my day with prayer, that I start my day with meditation, and that I'm able to mull over the words that God has spoken over my life and my identity, so I am more secure and strengthened in who I am called to be. And then in the same instance, that will make you more stable and secure to be able to pour into your spouse, into your children, and again, be present more. This is what this whole conversation or this 8-week series is really about.
I love the scripture in Psalm 127:2. It says, "It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he gives his beloved sleep." And so I think that really tells you, it's not that he's saying that you shouldn't rise up early or go to bed late, as long as your work in that time isn't eating of the bread of sorrows, because he gives you sleep. It's his delight in giving you, his beloved, rest, not just so that you could lay back and cast off all of your responsibilities.
That's right.
But so that you can reframe those responsibilities in light of his grace and understand the finished work of Jesus Christ that empowers you to do the work. But that means you've got to create intentional margin in your marriage. That means you've got to carve out space for quietness and stillness. And you've got to give your spouse permission to be able to call you on the rug and say, listen, you are so distracted. You are so engulfed and entrenched in this work, and you have not given any attention to your family. And for you not to be offended, but for that to cause you to recalibrate and get back on track and to focus in on what matters most, which is the time that you're spending with your spouse and, of course, with God. Because I believe wholeheartedly, this is what I teach when I teach about prayer, is that you can glean more in an hour in the presence of God by listening to his voice that can help you leap over weeks, if not months or years of striving and work in trial and error. I often teach this, the Lord's Prayer at the end of it, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. That scripture doesn't mean that God is leading us into temptation. That means that God will operate within the confines that we give him because he's so gracious, right? But he's like, I don't want to lead you from a place of restricted intimacy with you. I want to lead you through continual fellowship and intimacy, so that lead us not into temptation is the one who's praying, saying, God, I don't want you to have to lead me through a life of trial and error. I want to hear your voice and be able to cut out all of the mistakes that I'm going to potentially make by trying to do it in my own strength and my own will. But
and David confirmed that very much so with the scripture that talks about the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
That's right.
He leads me along the path of right, all that stuff. I'm not going to quote the whole thing, but when you are standing in right standing with the Lord, he is going to lead you. He may not show you again the full staircase, but he'll show you one step at a time. And as long as you trust him in the process, you'll look back and say, this wasn't by my works, this wasn't by my doing, but look what God has done, and it'll be for his glory.
Yes. Well, this has been a good conversation. If you aren't following us on social media, you want to go and do so at More Most Forever, TikTok, Instagram, all of that. But also go and sign up for the Presence Pledge. You can jump in at any time. moremostforever.com. Click that banner, sign up for it. Any last words, Viktoriya?
No, if you have not listened to other previous episodes, be sure to go back and also share with a friend. This is a very simple thing to do. I always send out links to some of the podcasts that I listen to, and I know that that's going to be a blessing to so many other couples.
All right. This has definitely been a needed conversation.
Yes, it has.
We'll see you next week. Reach out to us. Text us if you need anything. 864-428-7131. We'll see you next week.
Blessings.